Selena Royce thought she had the perfect marriage. Lucas Royce knew he had a dangerous secret. Tessa Vaughn never imagined her biggest mistake would destroy an entire family. Selena Graves had always believed in the idea of a perfect marriage. Growing up, she watched her parents share a bond built on trust and devotion, and she carried that belief into her own relationship with Lucas Graves. When they got married 6 years ago, she felt certain she had found the love that would last forever. Lucas was everything she had ever wanted: kind, successful, and endlessly charming. He worked as a financial consultant, earning well enough to provide them with a comfortable lifestyle. Their home in a quiet, upscale neighborhood was her sanctuary, a place where love and happiness thrived. From the outside, Selena's life seemed ideal. Friends often told her how lucky she was, how perfect she and Lucas looked together. She loved hearing those words, but deep down, she sometimes wondered if perfection was only an illusion. Lately, something had felt different. Lucas had always been affectionate, but now his touches seemed forced, his words rehearsed. He had started working late more often than before, coming home well past dinner, claiming client meetings or unexpected deadlines. At first, Selena dismissed it as stress. Lucas had always been ambitious, striving to grow in his career. But then came the small inconsistencies. There were nights when he smelled of perfume that wasn't hers. Nights when his phone buzzed with messages he ignored too quickly. Selena told herself she was overthinking things. She didn't want to be the kind of wife who second-guessed her husband's every move. The tension only grew when she noticed changes in Tessa Vaughn, her younger cousin. Selena and Tessa had always been close. They were practically sisters, growing up together and sharing childhood secrets. Even as they got older, they remained inseparable. Tessa often visited, spending weekends at Selena's house, enjoying long conversations over coffee and laughter-filled nights watching movies. But lately, Tessa had become distant. She no longer called as often, and when Selena invited her over, she made excuses. When they did see each other at family gatherings, Tessa barely met her gaze. She seemed anxious, on edge, and whenever Lucas entered the room, her entire demeanor changed. Selena noticed how Tessa's hands fidgeted, how she avoided sitting near Lucas. It was subtle, but undeniable. A growing unease settled in Selena's heart, but she kept it to herself. She didn't want to assume the worst. Maybe Tessa was dealing with something personal, something she wasn't ready to share. But there was no denying the nagging voice in the back of Selena's mind telling her that something was very wrong. One afternoon, Selena decided to do something to bring things back to normal. She invited Tessa over for lunch, hoping to reconnect and ease whatever tension had formed between them. To her relief, Tessa agreed. When she arrived, Selena immediately sensed her cousin's nervous energy. Tessa was usually vibrant and full of life, but today she was quiet and reserved, barely touching her food. Selena tried to get her to open up, but Tessa deflected, changing the subject whenever it got too personal. When Selena mentioned Lucas, Tessa visibly stiffened. She quickly reached for her phone, checking it more often than usual, her fingers gripping it tightly as if expecting something urgent. Selena didn't push, but her unease deepened. Later that evening, after Tessa had left, Selena found herself pacing around the house, unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She glanced at Lucas's side of the closet, noticing that one of his suit jackets was draped over a chair. Something told her to check the pockets. It was an irrational urge, one she normally wouldn't entertain, but she gave in. Her fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of paper. When she pulled it out, she saw it was a receipt, a hotel receipt. The date was from 2 weeks ago, one of the nights Lucas had claimed to be working late. Selena's stomach clenched as she stared at it. The hotel was outside of town, far from any place Lucas should have been. A chill ran down her spine as she stood frozen in the bedroom. This was the first real evidence that something was wrong. The excuses, the late nights, the strange behavior. It wasn't just in her head. But if Lucas had lied, then who had he been with? Selena sank onto the bed, gripping the receipt tightly as her mind raced. She wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that there was some logical explanation, but deep down, she knew better. This was more than just a coincidence. It was a clue to something far worse than she had imagined. She thought of Tessa again, her avoidance, her nervous glances, the way she refused to meet Selena's eyes. A horrifying thought crept into her mind, one she tried to push away, but it refused to leave. Could it be possible that Tessa was involved in this? Selena shook her head, refusing to jump to conclusions. She needed more proof. She couldn't confront Lucas without knowing the full truth, and she certainly didn't want to accuse Tessa without being sure. But now, she couldn't ignore the signs. The betrayal she feared might be closer than she ever imagined. For the first time in her marriage, she felt like a stranger in her own home. The walls that had once held so many happy memories now seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with doubt and suspicion. Selena knew that the life she had believed in was slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. But she wasn't going to sit back and let the truth stay hidden. If there was one thing she was certain of, it was that secrets never stayed buried forever. Selena couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the hotel receipt burning a hole in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. Lucas's name, the date, the location. It was proof that he had been somewhere he shouldn't have been. But what haunted her even more was the uncertainty of who he had been with. The idea that it could be her own cousin made her stomach turn. She refused to believe it without more evidence, but the signs were too strong to ignore. When morning came, Selena moved through her routine in a daze. She went through the motions, making coffee, scrolling through her phone, pretending to be fine, but her mind was elsewhere. Lucas acted completely normal, greeting her with a kiss on the cheek before heading off to work, as if nothing had changed. She watched him leave, her heart pounding. How many times had he walked out that door with lies on his lips? Determined to find out more, Selena decided to start where most secrets were hidden. His phone. Lucas was careful with it, always keeping it close. He never left it unattended for long, and it was always password protected. But Selena knew his habits. She had memorized the way his fingers moved when he unlocked it. When he stepped into the shower that evening, leaving his phone on the nightstand, she took her chance. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, quickly entering the passcode. The screen unlocked, and she immediately went to his messages. There were no suspicious names in his recent conversations, but something felt off. She checked his call log and noticed a number that appeared repeatedly. It wasn't saved under a name, but she recognized it instantly. It was Tessa's. Selena's breath hitched as she scrolled through the call history. Dozens of late-night calls, some lasting over an hour. Messages were deleted, but the frequent contact spoke for itself. Her hands felt clammy as she switched to his email. There, buried under work-related notifications, she found a booking confirmation for the same hotel from the receipt. Her stomach twisted. There was no denying it now. Lucas had been lying. But why Tessa? Why her cousin, of all people? Selena felt sick as she tried to piece everything together. Had this been going on for months? Years? She thought back to the moments she had brushed off. Tessa's sudden withdrawal, her nervousness, the way she had refused to sit near Lucas at family gatherings. It all made sense now. Selena needed more. She needed undeniable proof, a new plan, formed in her mind. If Tessa was involved, she would be the weaker link. Lucas was good at hiding things, but Tessa had always been more emotional, more likely to slip up under pressure. Selena decided to pay her cousin an unexpected visit. She drove to Tessa's apartment, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She wasn't sure what she would say, but she needed to see Tessa's reaction up close. When she knocked on the door, there was a long pause before it finally opened. Tessa stood there, looking pale and exhausted. Her eyes widened in surprise at seeing Selena, and for a moment, she hesitated before stepping aside to let her in. The apartment was dimly lit, and something about it felt off. There were unopened takeout containers on the counter, and a pile of laundry sat untouched in the corner. Tessa had always been tidy, but now her space looked neglected. Selena took it all in, filing every detail away. She kept the conversation casual at first, asking how Tessa had been. Her cousin answered with forced smiles and short responses. Selena studied her, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the way she kept fidgeting with her sleeves. Tessa was hiding something, and Selena was certain she knew what it was. Then, Selena decided to push a little harder. She casually mentioned Lucas's late nights, watching closely for any reaction. Tessa's expression shifted just slightly. Her smile faltered, her hands tensed. It was subtle, but Selena caught it. Instead of pressing further, she let the silence stretch between them. It worked better than words. Tessa swallowed hard, looking away. That was when Selena saw it. A small bottle of prenatal vitamins sitting on the counter. Her heart stopped. Everything clicked into place in an instant. The avoidance, the guilt, the secrecy. Tessa wasn't just hiding an affair. She was pregnant. Selena felt the air leave her lungs. Her head spun as she struggled to keep her expression neutral. If Tessa was pregnant, then there was only one question left to answer. Who was the father? Selena didn't ask. She didn't need to. The truth was already written all over Tessa's face. She stood up, suddenly needing to get out of that apartment before she said something she couldn't take back. Tessa watched her with wide, fearful eyes, as if she knew what Selena had just realized. Selena forced a smile, pretending she hadn't noticed anything, pretending she was leaving because she had somewhere else to be. But inside, she was unraveling. She walked out of the apartment and into the cool evening air, her heart pounding. She had come looking for proof, and she had found more than she ever wanted to know. Her husband had betrayed her. Her cousin had betrayed her. And now, there was a baby involved. The betrayal was deeper than she could have ever imagined. But Selena wasn't going to confront them yet. Not until she had a plan. She wasn't just going to expose the truth. She was going to make sure they both paid for what they had done. Selena drove aimlessly for hours, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The image of the prenatal vitamins on Tessa's counter was burned into her mind. No matter how many times she blinked, it was still there. She had gone looking for answers, and she had found something far worse than she ever imagined. Her husband's affair was sickening enough, but the fact that it was with her own cousin, now carrying his child, was a betrayal beyond comprehension. Her body was numb, but her mind raced. She replayed every moment over and over, dissecting every sign she had missed. The times Lucas had come home late, the times Tessa had avoided her eyes at family gatherings, the quiet tension she had brushed off as nothing. It had all been right in front of her, and she had been too blind to see it. Stopping at a red light, she exhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. She couldn't break down now. She had to think. She had to act. But what was she supposed to do? Confront them? Leave Lucas? Expose them to the entire family? None of it seemed satisfying enough. A horn blared behind her, jolting her out of her thoughts. The light had turned green, and she hadn't even noticed. She pressed the gas and kept driving, mindlessly winding through streets with no destination in mind. By the time she returned home, it was well past midnight. The house was dark, silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Lucas was asleep, sprawled across the bed, as if he had no worries in the world. Selena stood in the doorway, staring at him. How could he sleep so peacefully while she was drowning in the weight of his betrayal? For a moment, she imagined waking him up, shoving the prenatal vitamins in his face and demanding the truth. She imagined the look on his face when he realized. She knew, but she wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, she crawled into bed beside him, her mind still spinning. She needed a plan. The next day, Selena went about her routine as if nothing was wrong. She kissed Lucas on the cheek before he left for work, forcing herself to smile. She even sent Tessa a text, pretending everything was normal. She had to be careful. She wasn't going to let them see this coming. She started by digging deeper. If they had been careless enough to leave a trail of calls and receipts, there had to be more. While Lucas was at work, she went through his things, searching for anything else he might be hiding. She found nothing obvious. No love notes, no hidden messages, but she wasn't discouraged. He had been good at covering his tracks, but now she knew what to look for. Then, she focused on Tessa. Selena knew her cousin's habits well. She was emotional, impulsive. If pushed the right way, she would crack. Selena waited until the weekend before making her next move. The family was gathering for their usual Sunday lunch at her parents' house, and she knew Tessa would be there. It was the perfect opportunity to observe her, to push just enough to see how much she could handle. When Selena arrived, she scanned the room, searching for Tessa. She spotted her in the kitchen, helping their aunt prepare the food. She looked tired, her face pale, her body slightly more concealed in loose clothing. Now that Selena knew the truth, the signs were obvious. Selena approached her casually, pretending nothing was wrong. She made small talk, acting like she hadn't stood in her apartment days ago, staring at the proof of her betrayal. Tessa was tense, her hands shaking slightly as she chopped vegetables. Selena noticed everything. As the day went on, Selena played her role perfectly. She laughed, chatted, and pretended to be the same clueless woman she had been before. But under the surface, she was watching, waiting. Then, she struck. Casually, in front of their family, she brought up the topic of pregnancy. She mentioned how she had seen a friend recently who had just announced her pregnancy. She talked about how happy the woman was, how exciting it must be to be expecting. She didn't look at Tessa right away, but when she finally did, her cousin was frozen in place. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped her fork. The color drained from her face. Selena smiled. The reaction was exactly what she had been waiting for. For the rest of the meal, Tessa barely spoke. She excused herself early, saying she wasn't feeling well. Selena knew it was a lie. She had rattled her, and that was only the beginning. Later that night, Selena sat alone in her living room, scrolling through her phone. She had thought about sending Tessa a message, directly confronting her, but she knew that wouldn't be enough. She needed something bigger. Then an idea formed. She knew exactly how to make them pay. Selena spent the next few days planning every detail. She gathered every piece of evidence she had, screenshots of call logs, hotel receipts, everything she had found on Lucas's phone. Then, she dug even deeper. She went through Tessa's social media, looking for anything suspicious. She found nothing too obvious, but she did find old photos of them together. Tessa and Lucas at family gatherings, sitting a little too close, looking a little too familiar. Selena compiled everything. She was building a case, one that would destroy them, both. She wasn't just going to expose them, she was going to make sure they suffered. Selena sat at the dining table with a notebook open in front of her, the pages filled with scribbled notes, dates, and times. Every piece of evidence she had gathered was laid out before her, a puzzle of betrayal she had painstakingly assembled. She wasn't impulsive like Tessa, and she wasn't careless like Lucas. If she was going to take them down, she had to do it right. This wouldn't be a simple confrontation. It would be a reckoning. She had already rattled Tessa at the family gathering. The way her cousin had paled at the mere mention of pregnancy had confirmed what Selena already knew. But now, she needed to push further. She needed undeniable proof, something that neither Lucas nor Tessa could talk their way out of. The first step was getting inside Tessa's apartment again. She had done it once before and found the prenatal vitamins. This time, she needed something stronger. She waited until she knew Tessa would be at work, and then drove to her building, parking a few blocks away to avoid being noticed. Selena had borrowed a spare key from their aunt months ago, back when she and Tessa were still close. Now, that key would serve a different purpose. When she stepped inside, the apartment was eerily silent. The air was heavy with the faint scent of vanilla candles, the same ones Tessa always burned. Selena moved quickly, going straight for the bedroom. She rifled through drawers, searching for anything that could solidify her case. In one of the nightstands, she found a small, folded piece of paper. When she opened it, her stomach clenched. It was a handwritten note, one from Lucas. It wasn't long, just a few lines, but it was enough. I can't stop thinking about you. I need to see you again soon. I hate sneaking around, but I don't know what else to do. Selena stared at the words, her vision blurring with rage. He hadn't just slept with her cousin. He had feelings for her. He had written her love notes like a schoolboy with a crush. It made her sick. She dug further, checking the bathroom cabinets. Inside, she found an unopened envelope from a doctor's office. Her heart pounded as she tore it open. It was a confirmation of pregnancy, complete with a due date. The baby was Lucas's. Selena felt her breath hitch, but she swallowed the rising emotion. She wasn't here to cry. She was here to win. She snapped a photo of the letter with her phone and put it back exactly where she found it. If Tessa noticed anything missing, she would get suspicious. As she was leaving, something on the kitchen counter caught her attention. A second phone, smaller than the one Tessa usually carried. Selena picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed the power button. The screen lit up with dozens of messages from a number she knew all too well. Lucas. She scrolled through their conversation, her pulse quickening. I'll tell her soon. She's been acting weird. I think she suspects something. I love you. Selena's fingers curled into a fist. He loved her. After everything they had been through, after the life they had built together, he had fallen in love with her own cousin. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay focused. She quickly snapped pictures of the messages before placing the phone exactly as she found it. She had everything she needed now. When she got home, she sat in front of her laptop, uploading every piece of evidence to a private folder. She created a document outlining everything, the texts, the note, the pregnancy confirmation. If she was going to expose them, she needed to do it in a way that neither of them could escape. She considered her options. Confronting Lucas directly would only give him time to spin a lie. If she went to Tessa first, she might panic and warn him. No, she needed to be strategic. That night, she stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. By morning, she had a plan. She started by crafting an email, one that would go out to every family member. She attached the evidence, explaining in cold, precise words what had been happening behind her back. She saved it as a draft, her finger hovering over the send button. But before she sent it, she needed one final move. Selena waited until Lucas came home from work, watching as he casually tossed his keys onto the counter like nothing was wrong. He kissed her on the cheek, just like he always did, as if he wasn't living a double life. She forced herself to smile back. She spent the evening pretending. She made his favorite dinner, poured him a glass of wine, and sat across from him at the table, watching him eat with a calmness that almost scared her. He had no idea that everything was about to collapse. Later that night, as he slept, Selena reached for his phone. He had a habit of leaving it on the nightstand, and she had memorized his passcode months ago. She unlocked it easily, scrolling through his messages, confirming what she already knew. She went to his call history. He had spoken to Tessa just hours ago. Selena smirked to herself. She opened his text thread with Tessa and typed a message. "We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe." She sent it. Then she deleted the message from his phone, making sure he wouldn't see it in the morning. Tessa would show up expecting to see Lucas. Instead, she would find Selena waiting for her. Selena closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. By this time tomorrow, everything would be different. Tessa arrived at the cafe the next morning, her hands wrapped around her stomach as if shielding the secret growing inside her. She glanced around nervously, expecting to see Lucas. Instead, her eyes locked onto Selena, sitting in the corner by the window, sipping a cup of black coffee. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something chilling about the way she stared at Tessa. Calm, composed, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Tessa hesitated at the door, her instincts screaming at her to turn around. But it was too late. Selena raised her hand and waved her over, her movements slow and deliberate. Trapped by the weight of her own guilt, Tessa walked toward the table, her legs heavy, her breath unsteady. She sat down across from Selena, avoiding her gaze. Selena slid her phone across the table, the screen already unlocked, displaying a series of text messages. Tessa's stomach twisted as she read the damning words, each one tightening the noose around her betrayal. It was all there. The late-night confessions, the promises Lucas had made, the love notes. The worst part was that Selena wasn't asking for explanations. She already knew everything. The silence between them stretched unbearably, thick with unspoken accusations. Tessa's mouth felt dry as she tried to find something, anything to say, but there were no excuses left to offer. Selena tapped her fingers against the table, her patience razor thin. Then, without a word, she pulled another piece of evidence from her bag, a copy of the pregnancy confirmation. Tessa's entire body tensed. She reached for it, but Selena snatched it back before she could touch it. The message was clear. This wasn't a conversation. It was an execution. Selena leaned forward, lowering her voice to an almost gentle tone, but the sharpness in her eyes never softened. Tessa swallowed hard, feeling her heart slam against her ribs. This wasn't the same woman she had betrayed. The Selena sitting in front of her was different, colder, sharper, and completely in control. Tessa wanted to beg for mercy, to explain how things had spiraled out of control, but she saw no room for forgiveness in Selena's expression. Whatever hope she had of keeping her secret was gone. Her fate was already sealed. Selena stood up abruptly, smoothing the front of her coat. She picked up her phone, taking one last look at the messages before deleting them with a single swipe. She didn't need them anymore. The damage was already done. Without another glance at Tessa, she walked out of the cafe, leaving her cousin alone, trapped in the wreckage of her own choices. Selena drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wasn't finished yet. There was still Lucas to deal with. When she walked through the front door, she found him in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone absent-mindedly, completely unaware of the storm heading his way. She placed her bag down carefully, her movements slow and precise. Lucas barely looked up, too caught up in whatever trivial thing he was doing. It was almost laughable how normal he was acting, how easily he slipped into their routine as if nothing had changed. Selena didn't waste time. She pulled out her own phone and, with a few taps, sent the email she had drafted the night before. The email that contained every single piece of evidence, screenshots of messages, the pregnancy confirmation, and a breakdown of every lie he had told. Within seconds, their entire family knew the truth. Lucas's phone vibrated. He frowned, unlocking it, and as his eyes moved across the screen, his expression shifted from confusion to horror. His grip on the phone tightened. He turned to Selena, panic flashing in his eyes, but she was already watching him, her expression unreadable. The house felt smaller, suffocating, as the weight of his exposure sank in. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Selena simply tilted her head, waiting. Lucas's hands began to shake as he scrolled through the emails flooding his inbox, messages from family members, questions, anger, disbelief. His betrayal had been laid out for everyone to see. He reached for Selena, desperation in his eyes, but she stepped back before he could touch her. There was nothing left to say. Lucas's phone rang. He flinched at the sound. He already knew who it was before he even looked at the screen. Tessa, the woman who had helped him destroy everything. He hesitated before answering. Selena watched him with quiet satisfaction as his expression twisted in panic, his voice trembling as he tried to salvage what little dignity he had left, but there was nothing left to save. Selena didn't wait to hear the rest of his conversation. She picked up her car keys and walked out, leaving him to deal with the aftermath of his own betrayal. She got into her car, turned the key in the ignition, and drove off without looking back. By the time she reached her mother's house, her phone had already exploded with messages. She ignored them. She knew what they would say. Family members demanding explanations, offering sympathy, trying to make sense of the chaos. None of it mattered anymore. She sat in the car for a moment, staring at her own reflection in the rearview mirror. She wasn't the same woman she had been when this all started. The betrayal had changed her, hardened her, but she wasn't broken. She stepped out of the car and walked into the house, the familiar scent of home wrapping around her like a shield. Her mother was in the kitchen, the sound of clinking dishes filling the air. When she turned and saw Selena, her expression softened, full of silent understanding. No words were needed. Selena walked over and sat down at the table, feeling the weight of everything settle in her chest. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. Back at the house, Lucas sat alone in the dim kitchen, his world crumbling around him. His phone was still ringing, but he didn't answer. He knew there was no fixing this. And Tessa? She had made her choice the moment she betrayed Selena. Now, she had to live with it. But Selena? She was finally free.